Okay, so we're going to start off by doing this Dracula Dead and Loving It trailer. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look in the files first to see what we're kind of dealing with here. And you can see we're going to click on one of these frames, and this is what we actually get from the scanner. We get a scan frame. So we look over here. There's a lot of definition around this side of these holes, and we're actually kind of be using that information to get this stabilized. And you also notice that it's backwards, so we're going to need to deal with that as well. Okay, so let's go into our DaVinci Resolve. And I've already done this one before, but we'll just create a new project and try to start it again. So we're going to call it Dracula 2 because I already have one. Create. Okay. So the first thing we're going to need to do is go down here to this little button down here, and this is the first one. This is where the media pool is at, and we're going to go into media storage, and we're going to bring in our files. So when you click on the folder, find your way to the folder where it's at, it'll bring it up over here in this little corner, and you'll be able to see it. Now, what you'll also notice about this is that it's bringing in as a series of files. Now, for some reason, you get in here and you see this with all individual files like this. If you were to try to bring these in, you'd only get one frame at a time, which would be a problem. So what you want to do is go over here to this little box, those little three dots here, click Frame Display Mode, and change that to Sequence, and that'll give you all your frames. As long as they're numerically numbered without anything missing, it'll give you all those frames as one. Okay, so we're going to right-click on that, add into Media Pool. One thing that's very important to do is to set your project's settings. So this is under File up here, then you go to Project Settings. And at this point, this project settings will, you can then set the settings. We want to set the timeline resolution to the 3840 by 2160 Ultra HD, and set this to 3840 by 2160 processing. Make sure your frames per second are set at 24, because we're going to work in 24 frames per second video. Original film runs at that 24 frames. So you'll make sure this stuff is set right. For the monitoring, you can set it for 1080p. That's fine. That's just what you're going to see up on the screen. But the actual video will be at a higher resolution. And should be good to go. And if you've made any changes, you just hit Save down here, and it'll automatically it'll save all those settings for you. Right click on the this, and we're going to go to Clip Attributes. Now this is where you would set two different things. If we knew this was a scope movie, in other words CinemaScope, we would change this right here to 2.0. But since we know it's square, it's just a regular scan. We don't need to make any changes to it. The other option you'd have to have in here is the image flip, which is what we're going to use. They have an up and down and a left and right. We need the left and right so that the words look right. Remember, we were looking earlier, and the words were all wrong. So now you can see we've actually got our image looking normal. The words are all coming up normal. That looks good. And as you notice, that we go through this, it's bumping up and down a lot. It's got a little bit of bounce because when it was scanned close to where it needed to be. But you know, as the guy who made the machine says, it was a plastic machine. It did the best it could. So we got this. We got what we need, and now we're going to right-click on this file again and choose Create New Timeline using Selected Clips. And then for this timeline name, I'm going to call it the main edit. Now we're going to create the main edit. Now we have our main edit, and that's basically a timeline-like version of it. If you were to go in and edit this using the editor, this would give you this editor, and you could actually go here and edit all the frames and do all kinds of stuff to these frames. But we're actually going to be using a thing called Fusion to stabilize this and then crop it to the proper sizes to get rid of the soundtrack, and also make a special soundtrack so we can actually convert it back to sound. So now that we're in Fusion, we're going to do is we're going to move this media out over here, and we're going to move this over. We're going to get as much space as we can in this area because we're going to be using this a lot. And we're going to take this back to a low number frame. Usually want to try to get into, I usually try to say this to maybe start with the first frame of the introduction for the preview, and that would be it because you can see this little black line up here. We're going to start there, and that happens to be frame 44 on this particular frame, this particular video. Now, next step we're going to do is we're going to create some additional boxes. Now, with these tools up here, by clicking on the effects button up here, if it's not already lit, you click on tools, and then it'll bring you to a list of all the different tools. This little arrow will bring it down. We're going to click on color first. What we need is this brightness and contrast button. Now with this highlighted down here, so you've clicked on this, you click on brightness and contrast. Now I'm going to add 2 more of those. I want 2 more of those. I want contrast 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to set things up before we use them. So I'm going to just show you some things. So this saves me time, I think. So we go to mask, and we go to rectangle while we're clicked on that one. And we do the same thing on this one. Click mask and rectangle. And now we've got 2 different rectangles set up. If we click on the rectangles, we can actually see them. It's this green line over here. And there's another, this one's also a green line. These are actually separate ones. If you move them around, you can see that they move around separate from each other. So there we go. Okay, now what you're asking, what did I do this for? Okay, so where our goal is going to be is we're going to create a tracker. What a tracker does is it stabilizes our picture for us. And that's how we're using it. So we created a tracker by clicking on brightness control and then clicked on tracker over here under tracking tracker. And that adds it in. And our first step is to get these. We're going to use this tracker to actually track the holes on this film. And I've been testing this one already, so I know that the holes on the right side of the screen are the ones we want to use. So we're actually going to use 2 of those holes to track. How you do this is, and this is easier to see when we scale it up a little bit. So we can actually take this tracker and we can move it over. It's easier to move if I hadn't zoomed it in, okay. But live and learn, right? And this tracker is going to be over for this hole up here. And what we're going to do is add another tracker in. And this tracker, we're going to move him down. And we're going to put him right about there. So now we have the trackers in 2 different spots. Now you're saying, what is all this rest of this junk here for? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go back to scale so we can scale to fit so we can see the whole screen. And first thing I'm going to do is, and you're not going to believe that when I tell you this, is I'm going to blacken the screen out almost completely. So how we do that is we click on this brightness control and we go up here to the gain and we set this down to 0.0. And you notice that didn't show us anything because these little buttons down the bottom actually control what window we're seeing in the windows. So now we've taken the tracker and we told it, since it's the last one in the chain, we've told it to show us what's all up on this monitor. So right now this brightness and contrast has been brought down to 0, and the lift, I don't know if I need this to be negative 0.2, but I did it in the last time I did it, and that worked out really well. Now we're going to go over here to these rectangles, okay? And these rectangles are going to be used to limit the amount of area. So we're going to make them smaller. And I'm going to put them in the general area where we want them at. So we'll do the same thing with this one. The general area where we want them at. Over here. So for this first rectangle, we're going to go up here and we're going to make a change to its settings on its brightness and control. And his settings are going to be 2.71 ish. There you go. And 0.35 on the lift. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing on the other one. I'm not too happy with that. It should be brighter than that. All right, we're going to bring this on the brightness contrast on the first one. We're going to bring that down a little bit. Okay, so we can see this nice and clear. And that should have made this other one as well, nice and clear. Yep, he's nice and clear too. So we're going to use this little center hole, and we're going to move him so that he's just showing us this lower hole here. Okay. Switch back to our trackers. Here's tracker 2. And we're going to try to just bring this down so we're going to get just the corner of this box. And actually, it's still a little too big. Maybe make it a little smaller this way. And then when you click on it to move it, which is use this upper corner here. And also we're going to do is limit the amount of area that it's looking at. So this is the amount of area it's looking at. This is going to determine where it's going to track it, how far up and down it's going to track it, and left and right. So we're going to try to keep it in that range right there. So it's only going to track that. Then we'll go up to the top here, find our other tracker, and do the same thing with him. Just limit him to a small amount of area, and just get that corner. And you want this to be kind of small, but it has to be a unique image. So it has to be an image that's going to see as being able to track from one frame to another. But we also want something that's constant, so we know where it's at. Okay, so now we got that all set up. We're going to make this zoom back into full view so we can see the whole thing. And then we're going to put these trackers into motion. So up here there's a little button which is track forward from this position. So we're on frame 44, which is the first frame of our graphic. And we're going to say track forward. This is going nice. This is nice and smooth. You can see them bouncing up and down a little bit, just on the corners of those little dots of those of the sprocket holes. And this is how we're going to get our stabilization, because we're going to make this thing follow those holes. And by using the two-hole method, you actually get a very much more stable product. If you do it with just one hole, it's okay. But by adding that second hole to it, the second tracker, makes all the difference. And it's using this method of how you bring up your brightness and your contrast and all that, you can really get this right, nice and clean. And that's going to track through all the frames. And depending on how fast your computer is, that's going to determine whether this takes a long time or takes a little bit of time. The most important thing is to have a good GPU, graphic processing unit, on your computer. And we'll just zoom to the end here. So about a little over 2,100 frames, 2,152 frames, took just about 2 minutes, a little over almost 3 minutes, for average render time of 12 frames a second. So that's not too bad. Okay, so that was the tracking part of it. Good idea to save regularly with this program, but it's because this is a beta version, so I'm going to have to stay more regularly than most people would. So that was really good. We got a good track out of that, and we're going to now disconnect all this hardware in the middle here. Disconnect that wire, that little wire, or that little controller there, and we're going to take these guys right here, and we're going to throw them away for right now. We probably won't need them again, but we're going to put him over here, and we're going to connect this to the media out right to the trackers. Now the tracker, he's going to be doing some stuff for us. He's going to be actually doing the stabilization. So we're going to choose this match move option, and then where it says merge foreground over background, we're going to change it to background only. And we're going to leave these buttons, position, rotation, and scaling, all turned on. And what that's going to do is actually going to stabilize this picture for us. So instead of bouncing up and down like it was doing when we were watching it before, it's going to actually be much more stable. Now, because it's running through the tracker, what you'll notice is that the top bottoms borders of this whole frame are actually moving up and down. You can see it in the checkerboard pattern up there. So the whole frame is moving, the outside frame is moving, but the picture stays stable. And that's what we want. So that's what the tracker's done for us. And it'll take a little while before it gets through this all, if it was reading it all through, for it to render it out so it goes faster. But for right now, that's fine. We can just stop it here. Our next step is to turn this into two different sections. We want to make a soundtrack section, and we want to make a video section, just a picture area. So to do that, we're going to create, we're going to use some of the more tools we haven't used so far, and we're going to go into transform. Now the first thing I'm going to do is add a transform button. Now this transform button can be used to fix anything that was, whether this film was scanned a little bit crooked or anything like that, like rotated a little bit. We can actually use that to do that. So I'm going to put that right there and just have it there so in case I need it. And then the next one we're going to use is we're going to add in a scale. I'm sorry. We're going to add a crop. We're going to crop it down. We're going to actually crop the picture down. Follow that one by a resize. And now I'm going to click down here outside of this other area over here, and we're going to add another crop. You're saying, hey, why are you doing that? Well, that's going to be for the soundtrack. We're going to put the soundtrack over there. And then we're going to add another resize to that guy, because we have to resize him as well. And one other step I hate to do this while I'm thinking about it, is I need to add a brightness and contrast to him before he gets out. And now what we're going to do also is we're going to do just go up to this little block up here, and we're going to connect it right to that one. So now we got to go in two different directions. So we have two different things happening. One other thing we're going to do is we're going to click on resize and click on IO and click on saver. Now this is what's going to actually save it out to the disk. So this is how we get that to save out to the disk. We're going to do the same thing with this one down here, add a second saver. Now you see this little box came up because we kind of like went out of our area, started running out of space. But there's tons of space here. It's just that you have to move this little box around to see it all. So we'll leave it right there. All right, so now all this stuff is set up, but it doesn't have any configuration to it. So our first step is going to be to crop this guy down, and on the picture side. And another thing we're going to do is we're going to put our savers. We're going to put the right click on this one, and the left click we're going to put on this one. So that's going to be our soundtrack one. This is going to be our picture one. So we're going to crop here, and then I found that you have to do this. Is you have to type in this number. You have to put this cursor over here, and on the X offset you want to put in 2000 to start with. And that puts my picture way over there. And what we're going to do is bring it back, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back, till it's just right inside that purple line is hidden. That brings us our picture all the way over. Now we're going to do the same thing for our Y. We're going to do it to the bottom. We'll bring it to the bottom, to the bottom, to the bottom, so it just gets the bottom of her dress. This is kind of experimental. You could put numbers in until you got it exactly perfect, but you know. Okay, so we get it close enough. And then we say our X size. This is where we're going to actually fill it out to fill the whole side. Don't worry about the picture warping. It'll look normal when we get back to it again. We're just going to get it so that we get rid of some of that haziness on the side. And now we're going to do our Y size, which is our up and down. And boom, bring it right up here like this. And just bring that so it's just up underneath that line. Now if we look at our picture up here, we should be seeing it should be nice and normal looking. And a good thing to use is for a guide is also this green opening box. It's also a really good place to look. Okay, so now we've got our box lit up, and now we're going to take a look at go to our resize button. Now the resize button is has some rules. If you're using the Pro version of this, you can set this to almost any number you want. Leave it right where it is or whatever. But you're going to click on keep the frame aspect, and At this point, you want to scroll this, bring this down. Your highest number of the two numbers, the top number, the highest number can be 3840, and the low number, highest number can be 2160. So we're going to take this one down to 2160. It always does that. It gives you 61 for some reason. At the 2160. That'll automatically get this frame aspect ratio proper for that. We're going to go to the same one, do the same thing. Actually, we got to go through the same thing and do the cropping on this side as well. So do the cropping on this guy here, and we're just concerned with his soundtrack. So that's all we want from him. So we're going to move him over this way. So we're going to get just a little bit of the holes, and then we're going to do the Y offset. So it's just at the very bottom, and then we're going to bring the X size over until it's kind of just bringing in a little bit of the picture. We don't want a whole lot of the picture. We just want enough of it so we can tell where we're at. And then we choose our Y size and we take it up so it's up to the top. And there we go. And that's our cropping for that one. And then for our resolution, we're going to say keep the frame aspect again. And that gave us more of what we're actually kind of looking for. And we got to do the same thing with our resolution. We have to bring our resolution down so that we're within the 3840 to 2160. So I think the 2160 is going to be our guide here. Okay, so that gives us our soundtrack over here, and then here we go. And you may be wondering what we did this transform button for over here. We kind of like to look at these holes, and these holes look like they're a little bit wider at the top than they do at the bottom, which is what I'm seeing right here. I'm going to go into this transform button, and I'm going to adjust this by a small margin, like 0.2. And I'm kind of looking to see how these holes line up, and they kind of look okay. Maybe 0.4. That's too much. That was too much. Let's try 0.3. It still look a little too much. I'm going to go back to 0.2. Again, we're trying to get this to be as straight up and down as possible. And that's actually the angle of the whole picture. So if I was to spin that back and forth, it would go kind of crooked and be all on its side and be all like Batman fight scene mode. Okay, so there we go. This is what we got. And now we're going to have, this is ready to go. We have to go to our savers and we have to configure them. So we're going to browse to the saver and we're going to tell it where to put these files. I'm going to save it inside of here, but I'm going to create a new folder. This is the top one is the picture. We're going to put this in the picture folder. And it's going to save those files. So I've set it up so it saves it as JPEG pictures. It's going to actually save the JPEG pictures out each individual frame. And it's going to go, and then we're going to do Saver 2, which is going to save just the soundtrack pictures. And we'll do the same thing with that. We'll browse to that same place. It'll take you back close to where you were, and you can just put in a new folder and say audio. I'm going to use audio as my name. And we'll say save. Okay, so we have one more step before we can render this out. We have to set the brightness on the soundtrack over there. So let's take a look at the soundtrack, get into the soundtrack a little bit. Now I'm noticing that the soundtrack looks a little crooked. So I think what we're actually going to do is we're going to adjust that first. I want to adjust that a little bit up. So I'm just going to take our angle here and maybe get a little bit more. See how drastic that is if you try to use this control. It's too brutal. It's too rough. You need to be able to fine tune a little more. So let's try 0.4. Going the wrong direction. I think it's got to go back to closer to 0. -0.1. Yeah, that's probably closer. I wonder if 0 is just good. 0. Back to normal. No, I think negative 0.1 was better. Negative 0.1. Yeah. We're going to use that as our angle, and that should be good for this. It looks like the holes are nice and straight, nice and vertical. And then we're going to make one other little adjustment. We're going to adjust the brightness and contrast on this. I wouldn't know if it's a bug, but it's just the way it works. If this soundtrack is really too loud, then it's going to be it's going to actually make a lot of distortion in the thing. So what we're going to do is actually going to bring down the brightness on this. It's kind of like you almost want to gray it out to a certain degree. But there you are. That's going to be our brightness for this. And let's just scroll up a little bit. And that might still be a little bright, but I will say I think this should be okay. So I'm going to make that our brightness, and then we're just going to tell this. Now we're going to run we're going to actually render these out. So let's give this a shot. I like to put it back to 0. It doesn't matter really though. Go to Fusion, go to Render All Savers, and then it'll actually start rendering out all of our video for us. This actually makes copies of all the files. And puts them in there for us. Okay, so now it's actually finished rendering, and we're going to now do the next step, which is to convert the graphics over. We're going to take a look at the frames we did, and we're just going to scroll through to somewhere near the middle of these. And these are the audio frames, and here's our soundtrack in the middle. So we're going to use a program called Virtual Dub, and what Virtual Dub does is it converts files for us. We're going to turn those frames into a single video file. So we're going to open video file, and then choose audio. Go back to it, make sure we're in the right directory for this. Yep, we're in the audio directory. Choose our first frame, and don't worry about it not having soundtrack on it. It's not going to matter. We're going to go here to File, and then Save as AVI. Now when we do Save as AVI, this is going to give us, let's put a file name in. We're going to call this audio. And make sure that we're saving it in the same place as our rest of our video files are, which is right here under Audio Dracula. Say Save, and then make this faster. All you have to do is just unclick these two buttons, and that'll, instead of showing to you on the screen, it'll actually make it go a lot faster. So that'll convert all those frames into one bigger file. Okay, after we've done that, we can go find that file just to prove it's there. And here it is, Audio AVI at the very bottom. So now our next step is to run AEO Lite. And this is a program that will actually do the conversion of the audio video file into an audio file, something we can listen to. So we're going to, first thing to do is change our FPS. We want to go to 24 frames per second. And we'll open up a new project, and we'll bring in that video file. And if you change this from DPX frames to video files, you'll see that video file. And do we want to buffer the incoming video? Yes, we do. I'm going to take this and put him over here and bring him bigger. Now the trick to this is getting all these things set up properly. There's this yellow bars that are for helping to track the video better, using the video as an input to track the colors and the brightnesses. We're going to move those out of the way for right now, and we're not actually going to use them. So what we're really concerned about is this soundtrack area. We're going to move the slide bar down here to see the soundtrack area, and there it is. And we're going to try to find a section that's initially just to get our width of our soundtrack. and trying to look for this as wide as you can from side to side. Now, but we move the soundtrack buttons over, and this is going to actually set our parameters. This is our left side of our soundtrack, and this soundtrack button on the bottom is our right side of our soundtrack. And when you do that, you see that a whole bunch of stuff showed up down here. So this is part of the wave files of its detecting of it in this area of the video. Now, if you were using this with stereo soundtrack, you would click on the stereo button here, and you would adjust this accordingly and try to get this center line right in the middle of your two soundtracks. But this is actually a mono soundtrack, so we're not going to set it for stereo. We'll set it back to mono again. And I'll get rid of that white line by just moving this a little bit. Okay. So right when we feel we've got everything set up for that part of it, we now have to find where the frame line are at from top and bottom. The best thing to do is try to look for the brightest section you've got of your soundtrack. And of course, we dulled it out for a purpose, right? So we need to find some really bright frames. But I think there was some bright frames like right there near the end of this. There we go. So there's our bright frames. So these are good. This is doing like when it flashes the title logo near the end of the video. So we're going to use that as our guide. We're going to set our pitch, which is what sets the frame line size. We're going to put this one guy at the top, and we're going to take this other guy and move him down to the bottom. And what you'll notice is it'll kind of hit the right spot. Like you see how it kind of jumped, and now we're just going to adjust it to like the middle of that area. And it doesn't seem to be exactly right. We're going to keep going on it. Or what we're doing is kind of watching the bottom of it to see if we've gotten the right spot or not. Let's move the soundtrack a little bit around and see if we can then just try to get the pitch set right again. Find that frame again. There we go. Oh, there you go. So it just popped in right there when I moved this over to the right place. So if you see you move these arrows, and then what you're trying to look at is down here at the bottom in this little section where it looks like it's yellow. Well, if it's right, then this will turn yellow. And your goal is to get this as close to being pure yellow as you can by moving these sliders around. So once you find your soundtrack, like we just did there, we can get some more fine tuning on it by going to image processing. And this lift will help you adjust that out, and the gamma as well. So between these, you can try to get your lines to be as clear as crisp as yellow. The goal is to try to get this as yellow as possible. So what we can do now, since we're at a point now where we can test this, we're going to test it by doing this set in button, which is going to say that we're at this position of the soundtrack. And we're going to try to tell it to give us a sample of the music or the soundtrack. So it's going to go through and it's going to render off.
Dracula, dead and loving it.
There you go. So that was the Dracula Dead and Loving It. That's makes sense that that's where it was at in the soundtrack. So we can save those and use them to compare to different sections, but it sounded pretty good to me. So we're going to take that and go with it. Now the next step we're going to have is to actually extract the audio out. First thing you want to do is make sure you start yourself up at the very beginning of the video. That's important. Click the Set In button. And then this is going to say the frame is 0 on the frame in, and the frame out is going to be 2152. Sorry. Okay, hit Extract, and then give it a name for the output file. So we'll store it in the same place, and we'll call it Audio in the Audio folder. It'll be audio.wave when it comes out. Save and say OK. And now we're rendering off or creating our new audio file. And you kind of watch the bottom, it looks like it's staying pretty yellow down in this bottom area down here. So that's good news. Okay, then we're at the end at this point. So we'll just say OK, And I'm going to leave these running so we can come back to them again. Let's get back into our files. And we see we've got our audio AVI and our audio.wave. This is one we just created. So let's bring this up. Double click on it. So that sounds good. So that sounds good. We got a soundtrack now. So that's all ready to be brought back into our video. And we'll go back to our video editor. Okay. So now in here, we're going to go back into our media pool area, and we're going to bring in our new files. We have just created some video, and we've created some audio. We'll go to scans, Dracula, and here's our audio. You can either drag these down, like you can just do like that, drag it down, and you can also do, and we can do the same thing with the picture as well. You can just drag them down. Now we have our picture in here. We brought in this new file. We're going to create a new edit for this, because this is going to be when we're going to match our soundtrack up with it. So here, to do that, we do the same thing we did before. It says create a new timeline using selected clips, and we're going to call this final edit. Okay, so now we've just created final edit, and we'll go into final edit by double clicking on it, and it's going to take us into the editor. And we actually need to use the editor this time. So our first step is going to be we're going to use this little slider here. This is going to give us just one frame at a time. We want to kind of get it to, it doesn't have to be all the way to the very end, but very close to it. What we really need to see is 21 frames in here. It looks like I've got at least 21 frames there. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay. This is where our soundtrack belongs. So we're going to take our soundtrack and we're going to drop it right down here below it. Now you might say to me, why are we doing it that way? Well, the soundtrack is actually 21 frames ahead of the video. That's because of how it ran through a projector, the number of frames and distance away they were. So it's almost, it's a little over a foot from the sound from the picture to the pictures. There's actually 16 frames per foot as a reference point. So now we're going to go here to the very end, and we're just going to trim back that soundtrack because it's going to run for, 21 frames longer, and it's nothing on it, just a bunch of noise. So at the end of the reel. Okay, so we have got a basically edited video right at this point. I like to combine the audio track and the video track together. You do that by highlighting both of them with like a rubber band mode, and then click on link clips. And now our audio and our video are both combined. So if I wanted to delete the opening stuff up here, if I just want to take it off, it would actually take off on the audio too. So let's give it a roll, see what happens when we hit play.
Loving it.
Looks good. I think we got a good video out of it. So now you think to yourself, well, how am I going to get this anyplace else? How am I going to give it to my friends or put it up on YouTube? So next step would be to create files from it. I like this configuration they have for YouTube, but I don't like at 1080. They actually have a larger, a 4K and Ultra HD version of it. So we're going to use that. And we're going to name it what we're going to call the file, and we'll call this one Dracula 2. I'm just going to call it that for right now. Space dash YT. And that's going to be enough indication for me that I know what I'm doing, what it is. And then make sure that all the settings are set right, and make sure this is Ultra HD. Frame rate is 24. It has to be 24. And then don't worry about the rest of the stuff. It should be pretty much right. And then you click on Add to Render Queue. And I'd actually done some of these earlier, so let's take those old ones out. Okay. And then we have Master 264. I like to use this one as well, and to make sure the same things are set. 24 set right. I like to use it in MP4 mode, and as opposed to QuickTime mode. If you're using an Apple or something like that, you might want to like to use the MOV files better. But you know, they both work the same. Okay, so this time I'm going to call it Dracula 2. Oh, 264. Okay. And we'll say add that to render queue as well. So now these two are sitting over here in the render queue. If you click on either one of them, you'll get just that one. If you want to if you want to render both of them off, just click outside the range and click render all. It's going through and it's actually rendering that off. It's pretty quick on it. Of course, a lot of this depends on what kind of speed computer you have that you're using for this. The YouTube version will go faster than the other 264 will, but the 264 will actually have a lot more data on it. It's a bigger file, and it contains more data. Okay, so they're done. So let's minimize this out, and let's go take a look and see what we've got. I saved my files to a different place, but let's see, we just did Dracula 2. And we did Dracula 2 YT. That was our first one we did.
In a Mel Brooks film, Dracula, dead and loving it.
Okay, and that's it. It's done. And we've accomplished our goal. So that's what it takes to convert a film from scanned frames into a video you can watch and share with sound.